Welcome back to the rest of the readings, this time for the 10th Sunday after Pentecost. Our readings this Sunday were from Isaiah chapter 55, verses 1 through 5, Romans 9, verses 1 through 13, and then Matthew 14, verses 13 through 21, which our seminarian Jonah Wilson preached on this past Sunday. We're going to take a look at Isaiah 55 and then Romans 9, which the two of them don't necessarily go together well. But we get this picture here in Isaiah 55 of just this kind of invitation from God to the picture that I always get when I read this one is kind of that parable of the great banquet that when Jesus is talking about everybody kind of being invited to come in, and this is kind of that same picture we get here too, is just this. You don't have to have anything to come to the banquet, to come and receive.
Yeah, it is just so against common sense because it is, you're thirsty, you're hungry, come, but don't bring any money. You know, it's kind of that image to anybody who's been on a vacation where there's all the vendors along the marketplace, sidewalks, everybody's calling out to you to come over and buy stuff. And here God is saying, come and buy stuff for free. And so it's just one of this, this great grace that God offers everything, no money, no cost. But then it's also, why are you wasting your time and effort on things that are not good for you, the spiritual junk food?
Yeah. It's trying to point us to actually getting the stuff that's going to last, the stuff that's going to satisfy. Don't just go for what might feel good for just a moment. So come back to the Lord, take what He has, which is so much better for you. It's going to help you out so much more. It's going to satisfy. And part of that then is that He turns their attention to the reminder of the covenant that He's made with David, and just reminding them of what of how God's going to keep that covenant and continue to move forward with it. And this is one of those things where too, the people are in exile, and so this helps them as they're kind of dealing with the low of the lows right now, as they're now kind of needing that reminder that God's not going to completely abandon them and forsake them, but that He's still there with them. And He's giving them the messianic promise there and reminding them to, when we look at verse 4, see, I've made him a witness. It's kind of talking about the Christ there, and really kind of this image of the Messiah coming and gathering people together. We get that constantly throughout the Old Testament prophecies and the promises about how God's people are to attract others, or how others will be attracted to God's people and to their God by what is taking place and what He is doing for them.
People will hear the hope that's there, and they will be drawn to the messianic hope that Israel has, that they will come. The good news is there. God will be their God. They will be His people too. There's people outside, but God's invitation is for them too. No one is excluded from this invitation of grace. And again, it's that, to listen to God, His word. Later in Isaiah 55, we'll have His word goes out like the rain and the snow, accomplishes His purpose. So again, it's for those people who are sitting in hopelessness to listen to what God has to say. He hasn't given up on you. Don't despair. The messianic hope is still there. Even though the nation's in shambles, God is with you.
And short reading for our Old Testament lesson today. Just these 5 verses, and part of that connects then with our gospel. Just kind of part of what Jonah was focusing on was just the compassion of God. And we see God having compassion on His people here, even in the midst of some rough times for them. But as we turn our attention then to Romans, we start dealing with, here in Romans chapter 9, we start dealing with a little bit more of the kind of the issue of election and kind of this God choosing of people here also. And we had part of chapter 8 last week, and we'll continue to read bits and pieces of each of the chapters here for the next several weeks as we wrap up the book. But here at the beginning of chapter 9, as Paul starts talking, he's part of what he's pointing out is not all of those that are part of the Israel lineage,
physical descent,
are part of the family. Even though you'd go, but I can trace my ancestors. And Paul kind of is bemoaning this fact too.
Yeah.
Like, he is sad that his people, his Jewish relatives, all this, aren't part of, what's becoming the church at this point. But he's also then recognizing they weren't really part of the covenant to begin with because of their unbelief.
Yeah.
And so in the first couple verses, Paul's kind of acknowledging that he wishes his own people would believe what God has promised, to the point that he's willing to be cut off from the promise. If more people would be saved, he's willing to take that curse upon himself in order that his friends, his family, those that are outside the promise of Christ, would end up being part of it, because they would have seen how it all had followed through from the Old Testament to the New.
Yeah, you just see that frustration that has shown up so many of Paul's mission stops in the book of Acts, where he preaches and then the Jews kick him out. And it's just that frustration for him going, guys, this is what the Torah, the prophets have all been pointing to, and you're rejecting it. And it's just that frustration of, it hurts that those he knows are not listening to the gospel message and are rejecting that the Messiah has come, is Jesus Christ. And, as you'll go through the whole list of, they had the law, they had the prophets, they had the covenant, they had all descendants of Abraham, and they're not listening.
Yeah, he points out all those signs of kind of what they even pointed to, being God's people. And ultimately, Paul ends up saying all of those things in the long run aren't what matter.
Yeah.
But as he traces all of that down, and gets to verse 5, where he talks about, they're the ones with all the patriarchs, and we can trace the ancestry of Christ. Paul makes a very clear, definitive statement about who Christ is. It's probably one of the clearest spots we get in the entire Bible, that Jesus is God. They understood the deity of the God-man, and not that this was something that then came up. But Paul's pretty clear here. It doesn't really get much clearer than that. Christ, who is God over all. That's pretty clear. We know who he is, and while we may not understand how he's able to be God and man, we recognize that the two have been joined together in this one person. And this is the message we have for people to take out, and that's part of the message that's being rejected when Paul's talking to his own people. And as Paul then turns his attention to once again his people, to go, well, basically then why are some within Israel not part of God's people and some are? Paul quickly has to point out, it's not like God's word failed, which it hasn't. People don't believe the promise. They're not willing to hold on to it. And so that's where Paul recognizes, just as we would today, that not all descendants of Israel are believers. There are unbelievers and believers, and you can't tell just by looking.
No.
It's the same with the church of today. We may very well have people sitting in pews across the country, across the world on a Sunday morning. They're in church, they're hearing God's word, but they don't believe. But we would go, but they're there. So surely everybody who's in the building must be a believer. Well, we would go, we can't see the true church. But did they really believe God's promises? Paul says, no.
Yeah, and you would have history to point to, because that's the story of the Old Testament. So they were cut off. So that's what Paul is saying here. It's like physical ancestry means nothing. And it's all by grace through faith in the Messiah.
Yeah, it's faith instead of biology is what people need to have. And Paul kind of closes up this little section then with kind of talking about a choice God made. When the twins were being born, Jacob and Esau, prior to them even being born, God had already made a decision there. God had made a choice that he was going to continue the line through Jacob rather than Esau, even though Esau was the older. But God had already made this decision prior. It's really kind of the way we see God continually working.
Yeah.
He does the thing that you don't expect to have happen. And part of that is so that way, frankly, Jacob can't be like, look at me. Even though Jacob does very much have that attitude about himself. But God also then puts Jacob in his place on more than one occasion.
Yeah.
And so Jacob is chosen before there are any sort of conditions that could be met or anything like that. And God sticks with it.
And it's like, yeah, Ishmael's a physical descendant, but he's not the son of the promise. So again, it's an election by grace through faith. And so that's where it is. Jacob is chosen by God, and he gets the promise, and he hasn't done anything to deserve it.
Paul definitely wants to make that clear. It's not by works that God makes a choice, but rather it's by his divine will and providence that he ends up picking a path, and then he sticks with it.
Yeah.
And we're thankful that God is faithful to those promises and continues to see them through. And those are the same promises that we rely on today, even in the midst of struggles and things that we don't understand, that we're able to go, God's in control, and he's going to continue to guide and direct all those things. And we continue to turn to him in faith.
Yeah. Trusting in his promises.
So there's our look at the rest of the readings for this week.